Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this February 7th, 2017 day on our calendar. My guest today is Leo Zagami from Rome, and Leo comes on my show every couple weeks to update us. I like to get to the bottom of things and get to the head of the snake, and that's in Rome. I always say all roads lead to Rome, and I'm really grateful that Leo can give us a first-hand look at what's happening there. And we'll do that in just one second. But first, my Jesuit quote of the day. And in fact, I have two quotes today. And let me start out with what was in the Webster's 1828 American Dictionary. And these words have been taken out. They're now referred to as just a group of educators, well-known, etc., etc. But listen what they said in 1828 regarding the word Jesuit. One of the Society of Jesus, so-called founded by Ignatius Loyola, a society remarkable for their cunning in propagating their principles. Jesuitical, pertaining to the Jesuits or their principles in arts. Designing, cunning, deceitful, provocative. And then they said, Jesuitism is cunning, deceit, hypocrisy, deceptive practices to effect a purpose. I think that explains them pretty well. Now, the other day I gave you a quote, and this one is really basically tells you all about them in a very succinct sentence. Michelangelo Tamburini, who was the 14th Jesuit general in 1706 to 1739, said this, and he said, "See, sir, from this chamber I govern not only Paris, but to China, not only China, but to all the world, without anyone knowing how I do it." And I'm saying they do the same thing today. So let me get with that quote right to Leo. Leo, how are you today? Are you there?
Very well, thank you very much. Hello to all my friends in distant US. Yeah, I'm here stuck in Italy in a cradle, in the swamp still, in Europe. We are in the full swamp here with the liberals trying to work out their deals and trying to fight off the Trump administration. There seems to be a real battle going on. And in this battle yesterday, the head of the European Banking Commission, which is Mario Draghi, he said something that is very unusual. He said to the countries that are interested in getting out of the euro is irreversible. Well, that's not really, I think, the case, because I think that it's possible to reverse from anything. And definitely the euro is one of the things that Le Pen, the candidate in France, is getting very strong with. Is one of her points, together with also the going out of NATO, which will put France back in the De Gaulle period, if you remember. And so I think that this whole squabble with Trump is actually making the so-called populist parties even more popular here in Europe. But this threat came after Angela Merkel, of course, started to talk about the possibility of Europe in two separate Europes that accept the euro, don't accept the euro, who operate in two different speeds, basically. That's what she said.
Well, we know, just one thing, we know that England's going to leave. What about Italy? You think there's a chance you guys will go back to the lira, get back to your nationalism in your country?
First of all, let's see who said this irreversible. An Italian who is the head of the banking commission in Europe, who is a Jesuit stooge. He's an ex-Jesuit student, Mario Draghi. I think that it's typical of them to threaten the countries, and that's why today actually they started to use the spread. The spread is basically some kind of economic term that is being very popular in the last few years, and every time countries start to be in problem, this spread starts to grow. And when the spread starts to grow, the markets then fall. So basically, it's the way of blackmailing entire countries. When Berlusconi was kicked out, the spread went over 500 to 650 points because Mario Monti was being put in place. Mario Monti was the first prime minister not elected that we had after Berlusconi, and then we had a series of prime ministers up to the recent one, the fourth one, which is a not elected prime minister called Gentiloni, who is a Jesuit, of course, student, but is also a count from that nobility, the black nobility close to the Vatican, that we learned a lot about also talking during our long conversations, if you remember, back in the days. And I can say that this whole Trump thing is creating definitely a lot of turmoil, politically speaking, here in Europe. Of course, Great Britain is now going for a full Brexit. France, today, Sarkozy has been, who used to be the president, as you remember, he's been indicted for a scandal regarding his 2012 attempt for presidential election that failed, but he spent over double, apparently, of the money he was supposed to invest into this. So he has violated the laws, and now he will be probably condemned for that. In the meantime, Fillon, who is the main opponent of Marine Le Pen, which we remember, your listeners, is the candidate who follows the Trumpian ideal and who wants to get back France to the original sovereignty. And that means also coming out immediately out of the euro, but also out of NATO. Now, I don't think Italy will ever come out of NATO, and I don't really think any other country who is within NATO will come out of NATO. France has a history of also being out of traditional, of the NATO alliance, because they had also General de Gaulle, they had a whole period in which this happened already before in their history. In Italy, though, they're seriously thinking of going back to the lira. They're seriously thinking of leaving the euro. But we will be blackmailed a lot by Germany, and there will be a lot of impositions now that are taking place because Europe is forcing Italy into a series of sanctions, into a series of taxes that they are required, extra taxes that they are required to pay. I mean, It's not that this policy that the EU is adopting after Trump is actually helping Europe staying together. I think that what they're doing is even deepening the sorrow, the uncertainty, and the poverty of these countries that have suffered in the last few years. The only country who has gained out of the euro has been Germany constantly in the last few years. They have been the only country rising with their economy, and taking advantage of this euro, which, as Trump said, is a bit like a camouflage version of the mark, of the Deutsche Mark. And now we are, of course, in front of new elections also for Germany. So what is Germany doing? Well, Germany has an alternative for Deutschland, a right-wing party. But what they are aiming for now in Germany, unfortunately, is to elect the Social Democrat Schulz. If you remember, Schulz used to be in the EU. He's another of these people that have never been elected by anybody, but found themselves rising through the hierarchy of the EU because of their support by the Jesuits. And now he is instead playing a role in the future political campaign, in the future possible of Germany making this stand as new prime minister after many years, 12 years, I think, of Angela Merkel. Now, Angela Merkel is a Christian Democrat, but she's also an ex-Stasi agent, so an ex-communist agent. She's very close to the Jesuits, as those agents of the Eastern European bloc that, of course, collaborated with the Jesuits on the demise, ultimately the fall of the Soviet Union and all the countries that were involved in this called in the other side of the block, no? And you were actually here in Europe when that block was pretty much alive, so you know how things were. Now, when it comes down to Italy, we find ourselves now in front of a great problem, because we have all these immigration policies that are maybe adopted by other countries, like Great Britain is, of course, exiting the euro, but is strengthening their position in regards to immigration. We have even some countries within the EU that act much more in a much more stringent way. For example, even France now has adopted a very hard policy on the borders with Italy. And so a lot of these immigrants who try to get towards Northern Europe or to France get usually stopped at the border and sent back. So Italy is just keeping all these immigrants within their borders, and of course it's creating a lot of problems. I think socially, I think security-wise, you are able to see it wherever you go. I mean, this morning I was just for example, in a fraction near Rome, which is like nearly the suburbs of Rome, and I saw the way the immigrants act, the way they are in the streets, like thugs. They don't behave, they're not integrated, you understand, Greg? It's not a question of being racist here. It's a question that there is absolutely no integration. And you remember, by being in Rome, the beautiful center of Rome, areas like Fontana di Trevi and all those. I don't know if you remember these areas.
Sure. I used to go there every day almost.
I passed there the other day. I was in a meeting not far from Fontana di Trevi, and just walking, there were these immigrants harassing tourists, trying to sell them things, trying to harass them, saying things to them. I mean, it's really like, for a city like Rome to be to have fallen in the hands of thugs all over the place, and to not have any control over the territory, I think it's very bad. But at the same time, we have a big crisis now, which has been played right at the center of political power in Rome, with a scandal that is involving the mayor of Rome from the Cinque Stelle movement, the 5-star movement.
Right.
So the 5-star movement, which originally, as you know, promoted itself with Beppe Grillo as the alternative, to a way of conducting yourself in politics as an ethic and moral alternative, is now falling into the same exact biases that the past politicians from the old nomenclature used to fall for. So she's involved in various scandals, and not one, several. All these scandals seem to have come alive in the last month or so, and now we have basically the first mayor that was supposed to be from a force that was truly alternative to the system, truly not corrupt, in big crisis.
Wow.
But having said that, Beppe Grillo is still supporting her because she believes in her innocence.
All right.
He believes in her innocence. The problem is, if she's not so innocent, Beppe Grillo is risking basically putting this party in a very bad position, no? Because they are guaranteeing for somebody who is obviously doing things in the wrong way, because she had at least 2 or 3 people she dealt with in her close entourage that apparently received increases in salaries which were not justified. She herself found herself with a couple of 30,000 euro deposits made under her name for some kind of assurance policy, and this was not found to be justified. So there's a lot of strange things that are happening around the administration of Rome at the moment, which are creating problems.
Say, I wanted to ask you, if I could, are immigrants still pouring into Italy?
Yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to say here. The cities are vulnerable, and they're getting increasingly vulnerable because there is more and more immigrants pouring in, and they don't seem to be integrated. So you just find them on the corner of the streets, and I mean, either they're there in front of the supermarkets trying to grasp €1 for carrying your food to the car, or either they are on the corner trying to sell some Chinese gadget, or either they are real and proper thugs trying to sell drugs or do crime in the street. So, I mean, we are saying that these things are visible because they are, and Trump, in what he said lately, he said it's happening in the streets of Italy, of France, of other countries in Europe. This is actually happening. People need to listen to us and need to understand in the U.S. how the situation is really bad.
And I know, if I could say something, I know that's what he is saying here. He said we don't want to let what's happening in Europe now happen in America, so he put a pause of immigration from 7 countries that really have no control or governments in place. And he's getting a huge backlash, and it's on appeal right now. A judge stayed his order, and so the immigrants are pouring in again from these countries. And I wondered, since you are ahead of, with about 4 other Italians, the Trump movement there, and also wanting maybe to start a political party that can be trusted to bring forth changes to Italy, have you received a lot of criticism for this?
No, criticism no, because I think that the establishment is very weary of being critical of Trump and actually tries to embrace some of his ideals, using them as propaganda tools. That's what's really happening. And even members of the Democrat Party had said positive things about certain things Trump has done, which is unusual, though generally speaking, in the media, which, as you know, are in the hands of the left wing here in Italy, all of them, generally speaking, Trump is heavily criticized most of the time. So we don't have a pro-Trump view, if not from the Northern League, from parts of Berlusconi's party, and let's say more or less these are and Fratelli d'Italia, which is a minor party in the hands of a woman politician, but they are very minor. They make 2 or 3% of the electors, so nothing much.
Just one thing here. I'm curious because
they're trying to create a coalition between these groups that are Trumpians, but I think that the creation of a completely new political subject would be ideally the best solution. The problem is, though, Greg, that the way the system has crafted itself, like in the US, you can't build a party to join the elections. Even Trump tried many years ago to do that, and he failed.
Right.
So there is the established parties who have created a constitution. In a way, since the beginning, this constitution is centralized on a number of parties. And then this constitution was modified to make sure that no other parties could join the game after Berlusconi's attempt. Now, even the Five-Star Movement, Cinque Stelle movement of Beppe Grillo, they joined the system using the web and then a number of signings that you are required by law to certify and verify that you are an official party. Now, they are actually in the last few weeks even putting into question the fact that the Five-Star Movement has regularly done this kind of required documentation, because in some cases in Sicily, you can find this on the net, they were involved in scandals that where they found out that there were falsified names and falsified signings. So this means what? It means that this is a system that was crafted to protect their own people within the system. So now that you are proposing a new political subject, the only way you can actually join this system is if a number of deputies and senators within the system joins you. At that point only, you can, by law, form what is called a parliamentary group with your own new name and brand of politics. So it is something that we are trying to do, but it's not going to be easy, because, of course, the deputies and the senators from established parties that want to join this are asking a certain number of guarantees, no?
Right. Hey, I wanted to switch to the media for a minute. Here in America, the mainstream is basically all liberal, most of them opposed to Trump. He's battling them every day and openly states that to the American people. Now, I remember when I was in Italy in the 1980s, one of the things that really I was had to get used to was that there were a number of newspapers, and each newspaper had its specific outlook on politics. One was communist, I'd read that. One was socialist. One was Christian Democrat. One was anarchist. So each paper had its identity, and you could get different views by putting them all together. Is that changed in Italy? Is it now mostly all liberal, like you said? Are you there? Leo?
Yes, I hear you now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Technical problem. What happened was this: after the end of the Cold War and after the end of the First Republic, as it's known, the First Republic basically was the one that with the Christian Democrats, as you know, conducted almost 50 years of Italian politics. After this period ended at the beginning of the 90s, and we got soon after into the Berlusconi period, which, as you know, lasted another 20 years. Well, there was some specific changes here in the system, because, of course, the system that you were in was a system in which 5 or 6 parties, thanks to a coalition, managed to maintain government. They didn't maintain government for long. If you remember, Greg, every 3 or 4 months the prime minister in Italy will change. It was pretty much a joke.
Right.
It was a bit of a, it was like really...
Yeah, we have about 3 minutes here before the break, so squeeze it in 3 minutes.
Yeah. So basically there was, of course, a multi-partitic system. Then after the First Republic fall, Berlusconi came into power. The opposition, which was the left wing, coalesced against him in one main political faction that in the course of the years became ultimately, 10 years ago, the Democrat Party, taking over the name, of course, which is also established in America for the liberal thinking ideals. So the left wing started to become stronger and stronger because they were, of course, the old communists, plus part of the old Christian Democrats, which were traditionally, if you remember, the Christian Democrats went from far left to far right, all in a mix that was basically with currents. Christian Democrats had a left-wing current and a right-wing current, if you remember.
Right.
And in these currents ultimately separated when the First Republic fall, and the Christian Democrat Party, you remember, was even closed down. The whole political party after the end of the Cold War seemed to suddenly dissolve because for many years there had been a secret deal between the mafia, the CIA, the Jesuits to maintain the Christian Democrats as the leaders of Italy. Then after, when this went, of course there was no need anymore because the communists were not perceived as a threat anymore. They let the whole system fall apart in favor of Berlusconi, who raised to power with his TVs. Now we have the five-star movement. Of course, I heard also that some people, like Giorgio Lombardi, who is a close person to Donald Trump, has had good words for the five-star movement. I think that the five-star movement has a lot of young people who are also very honest people, very good people. Problem is that they are manipulated because Beppe Grillo itself had to make some compromises with the Jesuits and with the handlers of the New World Order to get things into place. Luigi Di Maio, who will probably be appointed the Prime Minister once they will go into power, is already somebody who had meetings with the Trilateral Commission, with people from the Bilderberg Club. So he's already starting to, Beppe Grillo is already starting to get into the system very heavily. Attending the Aspen Institute and doing all those kind of elitist things that we don't like. So this was to give you a whole overview view of the subject. But
Right.
I think that unfortunately they are the only party at the moment, the 5-star in the short term. But if Trump needs some proper Trumpians here in Italy, I think a new subject is being created these days.
Hey, Leo, listen, we got to take a break right now, so let's come back. We got a lot more with Leo Zagami on the Investigative Journal back in 3 minutes on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on First Amendment Radio. My guest is Leo Zagami. And Leo, we have to talk about everything going on with the Pope. Recently, of course, we know maybe a year or so ago he spoke to Congress. That was a first. Then he gathered all the heads of the world at the UN. He spoke to them. And amazingly, he gave a message at the Super Bowl.
I mean, come on. We couldn't have imagined that even 10 years ago.
And I'm going, I think they want to let all the American people know who the real boss is. What's going on in Rome with our good friend Pope Francis?
I while he's trying to gain momentum internationally, in Rome he's very criticized within even the rooms of the black nobility, amongst the room of the salotti bene, as they call them in Rome, no? And what happened lately was shocking. One morning, Rome woke up and posters all over town criticizing Pope Francis, written with his face, written in Roman, not even in Italian, written in Roman, and calling Pope Francis a Francese. And they say, basically, they criticize all his positions internally, the one regarding the Knights of Malta, which he's basically making the Grand Master resign, the whole order has been put under investigation. He has picked up the order now, and for the first time in history, not respecting the sovereignty of this knighthood. He has basically put them under his control, so it's unheard of, even within the black nobility. So this is one thing. Then they were talking also about a particular congregation of monks which wanted to conduct the more traditional approach to the Catholic faith, and instead of being elevated in the Catholic Church, they were actually punished. And they are a particular branch of the Franciscan monks, which was dedicated to let's say, the more traditional way. And so this is incredible because, now Pope Francis has asked the help of the Italian secret police, Digos, to investigate this matter. And the Jesuit Spadaro, who is like the spokesperson for the Pope now at the moment, says ignorance is force. What does it mean, this? I don't know. But in any case, there is this also heavy criticism towards the fact that he has not in any way wanting to listen to the voice of this dissent in the Catholic Church. They actually say this in this poster, and so this shocked the whole of Rome. For the first time, you know how many illegal posters there are around Rome every day, but this one was one that the Commune of Rome covered immediately. They went around the whole of Rome, poster by poster, and they put a special plank on it with the symbol of the Commune of Rome, of the mayor of the city and the city council, sorry. And so it was pretty impressive to see the reaction was pretty strong and by the Vatican, because the Pope must have been shocked. You have to understand, this is not like, it hasn't happened, I think, in hundreds of years that the Pope was publicly criticizes. They showed, I remember yesterday in a documentary, maybe a couple of times in history, the Pope was openly criticized in this way. So they criticized his position towards also the congregations where he actually removed priests so he could totally silence any dissent. They basically, at the end of this poster, say in Roman, "Mando sta la tua misericordia," which means, where is your misericordia, your clemence, where is your goodness in all this? Mm-hmm. So I think that this was considered pretty shocking. And yesterday I received a call by somebody in the Huffington Post here in Italy, because it seems like most journalists here in Italy, they don't have a clue of what's going on. The ignorance of the liberal journalists, of the left-wing journalists towards these topics, Greg, is infinite, because they always have worked for the system. So they don't know. They always thought that people like me and you were simply loonies, right, talking rubbish. And suddenly the Huffington Post is trying to find a way to get information through me so I could put them in contact with one of these rebels, or at least a spokesman for them, which I ended up managing in some way. But this demonstrates that the mainstream media is finally discovering that what we've been saying for years is true, that what is said in my book, Pope Francis the Last Pope, ? That came out a couple of years ago in the US, is true. And now, apparently, it was also in the news that Donald Trump has his own personal spy in the Vatican in the last few weeks. He has sent his own agent within the Vatican because at the moment a lot of these traditionalists, even the ones who are behind the posters that were around Rome, are very supportive of Donald Trump. And they are very close to the positions of Cardinal Burke and also other traditionalists within the Vatican. Remember that a couple of years ago there was at least 10 cardinals that moved some remarks regarding the latest positions of the Pope. And of course, the Pope every day is giving remarks that are putting the Catholic faith in crisis. Now, today, this is another of these days, because today the Pope said that basically it's okay if you want to take your own life if you're sick.
Oh, really?
He came out with the statement that basically is kind of, for the first time, saying, okay, if you are half dead, you can pull the plug, no problem.
So now, he's contrary to the biblical teachings, but he's also contrary to traditional Catholic teaching, correct?
Absolutely. I think he's contrary to the basis of Christianity, if you want to know the truth. But I mean, this is it's very
Why?
crazy.
What do you think his motives are behind the scenes? What does he want to accomplish?
By doing everything he's doing every day, he's mining the Catholic faith so he can eventually transform it in something else, in a one-world religion which is embracing also Islam. Now, in regards to Islam, the cardinal from Milan, said something which I find quite incredible. If you want, I can tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
He said at the opening in Milan, he was present in this thing, he said, well, they should institute Festa Islamica in tutte le scuole, basically an Islamic event in every school in Italy. An Islamic, like a religious festa for all the schools in Italy. And this was said by Archbishop Angelo Scola, not by anybody. This is one of the most powerful cardinals in the Vatican, one of the people closer to Pope Francis, and he is not only not criticizing the fact that Islam has been the reason why a lot of people have renounced to the presepe in the schools this year. You remember this, historically, Italians always like to have this representation of the nativity in their houses and also in the schools, public places. Now, because of the criticism that was moved by the Islamic movements, some schools, most schools, have not put a nativity or a Christian representation in their school to not offend the Muslims. Then the cardinal has also, in his in this talk he did, he has encouraged the construction of a new mosque in Milan.
Wow.
I think that, I mean, come on, more than this, I mean, it's crazy. And then he has even invited Europe to create a new Marshall Plan that could help immigration. And this, of course, was... and also he had good words for the Minister of Finances in Germany, Schäuble, which is notoriously close, is the Angela Merkel's henchman, is one of the worst drunken elitist scumbags in Europe. And the Cardinal had good words for him. So this is the Pope Francis Church, a church that embraces Islam, a church that embraces Germany amongst any other country. And interestingly enough, of course, the New Yorker has titled an article in a very Pope Francis is the anti-Trump. I mean, come on, guys. So now this war is really between Pope Francis and Donald Trump. I think that if we had to really say who are the main players of this new world order at the moment, and the war is being fought by these two figures, and that the currents that are trying to undermine Trump, and the ones instead that are trying to undermine Pope Francis in reaction, because of course there is two opposite factions that are waging basically war with each other, and that's why Fra Matteo Festing, the former Grand Master of the Sovereign Order of Malta, for the first time became participant to this historical resignation, which, of course, even the New Yorker, when it came down to the official reasons given by the Vatican and the press, at one point they clearly say that this whole history, this whole story that started with some kind of, I don't know if I told you this internal problem with the Knights of Malta regarding the support for programs in which they use condoms in third world countries and so on, and this became the relevant thing to investigate. But in reality, we know very well that this is because Cardinal Burke is a supporter of Donald Trump. He has made sure that the Knights of Malta actively supported, especially with this whole network which connects the Italo-American NIAF, which is basically, I don't know if you know NIAF, Greg.
No, go ahead.
Have you ever heard?
No.
It's the National Italian-American Foundation. It's based in Washington, on 19th Street in Washington, and it serves as a resource for the Italo-American community. To preserve the Italian-American heritage and culture, but in reality is a trade union between the Knights of the Vatican, the Italo-Americans, and it was very important for Donald Trump to have them on board and to actually support him. In fact, there were actually secret meetings that took place in New York to facilitate his elections, thanks to the support of the NIAF. So, as you see, there is a real war going on here now between an order that, of course, supports Trump and supports traditional values, and instead the Pope, which it's of course the traditionalists, which were headed by Cardinal Burke, have been kind of put on the side now, because the Pope unilaterally nominated his own representative to deal with the Knights of Malta, and by doing this, since yesterday, he has put on the side Cardinal Burke out of the game.
Right, he's fighting back, right?
He's fighting back, and he's making sure that Cardinal Burke is not anymore in charge like before. I mean, nominally speaking, he's still the patron of the Knights of Malta, Cardinal Burke. But since Pope Francis has intervened so strongly, now Cardinal Burke finds itself a little bit without the possibility, because this priest that the Pope, the special envoy the Pope has nominated for the Knights of Malta, has unprecedented access and resources in order to restructure the Knights of Malta. But you have to understand that this is not something that is welcomed by the Knights of Malta, because the Knights of Malta, it's an independent organization, not made of priests.
Correct.
It has, of course, some priests, there is chaplains, there is figures of priests, of course, present in the Knights of Malta that participate, but most of them are not ordinary people, because you have to be, of course, of the nobility. And this is another thing that the Pope Francis is doing, and for the first time he's putting into discussion the bloodlines. He's making a super communist move at the heart of the bloodlines. And by doing this, he will be able to let into the Knights of Malta people from bloodlines who were not, who have been banned, who who had been barred from entering the bloodline contest, and of course the Knights of Malta, which requires, you see, when you go into Knights of Malta, you have to demonstrate at least 3/4 of nobility, and you have to say who your ancestors were for a number of centuries before you. Otherwise, you can't join the Knights of Malta at the moment. Wow. And they will check every single ancestor of yours to see what kind of problems they had, if they were friendly to the church or enemy of the church. They will see everything, basically. And
well, you know,
DNA.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to clear up, maybe you could help me clear it up. We know that the Pope, Pope Francis, is the first Jesuit Pope, and people who don't understand what the Jesuits are about, this is unprecedented. Now, secondly, we know he's sympathetic to Muslims, atheists, every other group, but he seems to be anti-Catholic and destroying the Catholic Church.
Remember who stopped the Muslims in Europe? There was one order that 5 centuries ago, and my ancestors were part of those of the Knights of Malta, so I am actually one of those people who has by inheritance the right to join. And still I didn't join. I joined the Orthodox one. I preferred, because I didn't want to be in the Catholic one. But in any case, the Catholic one, which I am in contact with, was supported Donald Trump, are the only ones who want to stop the Muslims. And that's the problem also. You see, because he's mining the defense system of the Vatican here.
Well, what happens if he's getting old? Now, if his goal is to create a one-world religion, and he's getting old and might not be there, and he might be, like you say, the last pope, something big has to happen pretty quickly, right?
Well, they have already a black pope ready. Black in the sense, this time I think it will really be black, color black. I mean, I think it will be Cardinal Taxon, I think is his name, ready to step in eventually. And he's like, in the same, he's under the control of the Jesuits, works in line with Pope Francis, and that's it. But as I said, there is, this unprecedented thing that happened with the posters is being investigated already. And it's not just posters that have been put by anybody. They have been put by, it says here, a group riconducibile agli ambienti conservatori, basically traditionalists within the Catholic Church that are openly criticizing the Pope, and they are threatening a schism, because this is the thing. If the Pope continues within this line, I think that within a year we could start seeing some kind of schism going on, because that's what happens when you start having this kind of division so marked. But the problem is, Pope Francis might have the support of the liberals, but dear Greg, how many liberals go to church?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yes,
no.
Yes. Yeah.
No, a very small part of liberals, and they only go to church maybe once a year, or when the guy dies or whatever, but they're not people. Instead, the traditionalists are the ones who really go to church and are present every week. So if the traditionalists start being really upset with the Pope, this could lead to some unprecedented situations. I mean, no wonder that the Pope has ordered a thorough investigation, and that they are all up in arms in the Vatican because of this thing that happened, because it was a strong message. It was put literally all over Rome in front of his doorstep with his face and with his face, but of course they have put this very serious picture of Pope Francis. You saw the poster I sent you?
Yeah, I've got it. I've read it. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And then after they put affissione abusiva, and they blocked the whole thing around Rome, because they don't want the people also to read the content of what they wrote. Because not everybody in the Catholic world knows what's happening. Of course, we are a minority. How many people have really followed what we've been saying in the last few years, Greg?
Yeah, exactly. You know, one thing I was going to ask you, I remember I was there when John Paul II was Pope, and every Wednesday I would go to the Vatican Square and listen to his speech. He'd get on the balcony, and then I'd translate his speech and then send it back to the States. But and everybody there, the people loved Pope John Paul II. What's the Italian people saying about Francis on the streets?
That's the thing. He doesn't have the support of the people in the streets, because in the meantime, his church is falling into those scandals. You remember in the last episode we talked about Don Padre Contin and his ladies, and a church transformed in basically
bestiality, right?
Well, debauchery of every kind. I mean, he started with ladies, he ended up with horses and passing through immigrants and all kinds of things. I mean, this is the church of Pope Francis, a church that is literally falling into the hands of the devil. So these traditionalists are stronger more than ever. I mean, and now, from what I gathered also from the Huffington Post, even the left-wing journalists are starting to sympathize with us.
Interesting.
Because, and this is really strange. In fact, I was a little bit skeptical, about giving my informations and my sources to the Huffington to go on with their investigation. Though I think it's important for journalist colleagues to be able to, who have, of course, a more widespread viewership, to help them out in some way understanding things, especially when they are at a loss. Because yesterday I understood that the majority of journalists is at a loss. The majority of journalists maybe today should listen to the last 10 years of Greg Zismansky and Leo Zagami to maybe understand where we are now.
Right. Hey, we got 2 minutes. What about this Father Contin? Any new news on him in the last couple of weeks?
Well, yes, as I said, the last time he maybe has a son, maybe he has more than a son. I mean, the whole thing is just becoming an ongoing struggle. But now there is a bigger scandal, Greg, and we can mention it for half a minute now before the end. Australia, 7% of the Catholic priest has molested 4,000 kids.
Wow.
This is a 4-year thing presented to the Federal Commission. This is not just a journalist thing. This is actually a condemned by the government.
Wow, I didn't hear about that.
Australia is getting on the map for this thing. Ignored people that for many years have suffered want to have their voice heard. And I think that above all the bestialities of Padre Contin, I think those serve to cover really what is the big problem, which is pedophilia. Because, I mean, the adults are free to do whatever they want in their spare time. But I, of course, like most of your listeners, don't accept what's happening with pedophilia in the Catholic Church. So I think that this is a very strong thing that demonstrates that the Catholic Church is now, more than ever, a dangerous sect.
Exactly.
If I define it in some ways, a dangerous sect. That's
Leo, we only got 20 seconds. Any word? I know you want to talk about Lady Gaga, but anyway, let's...
No, more than saying, I mean, we don't have much time, so I want to invite people to buy my next book, which is going to be Confessions Volume 3, that is coming out in a couple of months, maybe a month, in America, and we'll talk about all these things in that... And so that's my invitation.
All right, Leo, listen, I'll let people know we're out of time. See you next week on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the left-behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.